DealQuest listeners and viewers, I'm so excited to have John Bly as a returning guest on an upcoming episode of DealQuest. John, you are such a deal maven, whether it's doing deals for yourself, for clients, writing books about it, etc. And we did hear from you on episode 7 about the 14 deals you did to grow your firm. What are we going to hear about on this return episode of DealQuest?
I think, Corey, it will hear a little bit about what's happened in the last few years, what's going on in the M&A market, and how our firm has changed its strategy and done some different things in the last couple of years. And then, we've recently had some announcements on some deals, and we'll probably go through those as well.
I love it. Yeah. And folks, just to tease it a little bit more, after being an acquirer for many, many years, John became a seller, and now he's and in the new firm, he's an acquirer again. So, you're going to get to hear that and listen. John's journey is very instructive, and he sort of takes his own teachings and eats his own, whatever that phrase is. So what he teaches clients, he does for himself. So, definitely check out the upcoming episode of DealQuest with John Bly.
Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is Deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On the show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions to smaller deals that you can do even without significant capital. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the DealQuest podcast. Let's get started.
DealQuest listeners and viewers, I'm so excited to have John Bly back as a returning guest on the DealQuest podcast. He was on episode 7, believe it or not, back in March of 2019. This is going to be episode 140 something. Some things have evolved. So if you are John Bly, you study the methods that the PE firms and larger corporations employ to identify growth opportunities through mergers and acquisitions. Then you use those principles to scale your business and write best-selling books to share your experiences. Of the hundreds of merger and acquisition success stories that John Bly can tell, the most compelling story may be his own. John left the security of his Big Four position to start an accounting firm that he scaled into one of the fastest growing privately held companies in North Carolina, landing on the Inc. 500/5000 list 5 years in a row. John engineered the firm's growth both organically and through M&A, merging 14 firms, ultimately leading to a combination with the top accounting firm, Aprio, LLP, where he now serves as regional managing partner for the Carolinas. He's also the author of Cracking the Code, which is a phenomenal book. I recommend it. Go check it out. And, in the last episode, when we last left off with John Bly, we talked about those 14 acquisitions and how he's grown his firm. But in between now and then is when he did the deal to sell his firm. And then we will get into just 2 days ago, they did, led by John, a major acquisition of their own. So we have some great updates with John. And John, it's great to have you back on the podcast.
Thanks, Corey. I'm excited to be back. And I can't believe it's only been a couple of years, but it feels like 10 in some ways, given what's going on in the world.
Pandemic years are very different than regularly like dog years, right?
And crazy M&A years, right? Not just
M&A years.
Not just for us internally, but for the M&A profession as a whole. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So John, my opening questions back at episode 7 were, I think one of them was the same and one of them was different. So I'm going to ask them to you anyway, because it's been a while and, folks might not have, folks, you should go back and listen to episode 7. I mean, we're going to touch a little bit on, the same ground in terms of what got John here, but we're going to focus mostly on what's happened since. So definitely check out his original episode. But John, so remind people, my opening question is, hey, what did you want to be as a kid when you're growing up, 8, 10, 12 years old? Did you always want to be an accountant? Was that your dream as a kid?
It really was my dream to be an accountant, somewhere in that 10, 11-year-old range. My dad was an accountant. now I'm not sure. I barely qualify probably as an accountant. Now I'm more
That's
of
right.
an M&A entrepreneur, business owner, consultant, advisor, rather than a true accountant. But I found a way to make it significantly more entrepreneurial as I grew up than maybe the stereotypical accountant. How about that?
I love it. I love it. And and back on episode 7, my second question was about your first business. So, John, my second question now is different than what I used to ask when I asked, hey, what was your first business or entrepreneurial experience? Now I ask, what is your first deal that you can remember of any type, whether it was when you were a kid or later in life, whatever comes to mind?
I'd say that the first deal that I can really truly remember is probably the one that I did that got me out of the corporate world in 2004. And the funny thing there is it all started with the back of a journal of accountancy. This is 2004. So this is for those of your listeners who are a lot younger. This is before Google actually existed, right? Yahoo was the search engine of choice. That tells you how long ago it was. And the Journal of Accountancy in the back of the trade magazine, the actual physical copy, not the digital copy, folks, was a classified ad that talked about buying an accounting practice. And I was like, what the heck? That's a thing? And I had no idea. I was at PricewaterhouseCoopers at the time, and I had no idea that was a thing. And that got me started towards that first acquisition in August of 2004.
I love it. So listen, I don't want to spend a lot of the time here because, again, we did cover it in the original episode 7. But just we mentioned 14 acquisitions. I mean, you did a chunk of those even in your first year in business or to get into business. Just give us like 2 minutes overview of that period, and then I really want to focus more on what we didn't get to talk about because it didn't happen yet. On the last episode.
Yeah, so I mean the first 5, 6, 7 were all relatively small, under $1 million. Certainly, some of them were under $100,000, and we're really focused on getting to a core size that allowed my wife and I, because we started it together, to get to a size where we could employ people and have a system. And then probably in about deal 7 or 8, I realized that other accounting firms and really other small businesses were not doing this as a growth strategy. Then it became very strategic. Before that, it was really just we got to get some breathing room here. Then it became oh boy, we found something that other people have not. And it became very strategic as we scaled from, 0 revenue in the summer of 2004 to about 12 million when we merged with Aprio in 2019.
So all right. So let's jump. So listen, folks, it really makes sense to listen to the other episode. It gets into more detail about, how we, did those deals, sort of the mindset, because listen, how many business owners of any type, how many accountants certainly start an accounting firm and, spend, decades, trying to grow it organically and never do a deal, right? Or maybe they do a deal much later. So there aren't many people like John who come out and say, let's do 5 or 6 deals in the first year or so, and 14 deals. So there's a lot of gold there. But so now, John, you get to this sort of critical mass. You're a very successful, firm in the Carolinas. You've personally moved from being an accountant to, being an M&A guy, and wrote the book Cracking the Code, which I mentioned in your bio, which is fantastic. So what has, and I know you to be the consummate entrepreneur, right? I mean, we're both, been in entrepreneurs organization for years together, and you've been a leader there. So, it's got to be a big decision for somebody like you to become a seller as opposed to a buyer, and go from becoming, being the king to being one of the leaders, right? It's not, you don't go from king to peasant, but you have to share power, so to speak. So talk to us about that decision-making process of what had you choose to do the sale.
Yeah, so it was the spring of 2019, and Aprio and LBA, our prior name, had a very strong relationship for a few years leading up to that. Richard Kopelman, our CEO, and I had become friends from about 2014 or 15 on. And we're getting together every 6 months to share ideas about the profession. He had recently become CEO of the firm that had been 60 years in the making before he became CEO. And he was spending time with me trying to figure out what we were doing in deals, and trying to learn. And we were sharing ideas. And I was trying to figure out what it was like running a firm he was running that size. And in the spring of 2019, we started to build our 2025 plan, in our North Carolina LBA firm. And when we started to look, we said, okay, we're going to double in size again. We had a rallying cry of 25 by 25, which was 25 million by 2025. And we looked at what that would take from a people, resource, technology, data analytics, all that sort of fun stuff. And we said, boy, this is going to take a different lift, a different strategy that it took to go from 0 to 12.
Yeah.
And we all looked around and said, maybe it's worth exploring. There's only one firm. I've run across so many firms in the country. Aprio is the only one I've found that really was large, but was really an entrepreneurial firm. They're very different than most of the other large firms. And I said, well, let me just have a conversation and see what that would even look like. Let's start to have some opening discussions. And it led us down a path that said, you know what, we could continue as we are till 2025. And we know what those investments are going to be, or we can hitch our wagon to somebody a little bit larger than us who's already made those investments in the last 5 years and accelerate our growth significantly more and get out of some of the minutia.
Yeah, love it. And what was the relative size? I mean, again, any question you don't feel comfortable answering, just let me know. But what was the, if you're willing to share, what was the relative size of the two firms at the time?
Yeah, so we were about 12 million and about 70 people, and Aprio was about 80 million and call it 375, 400 people.
Yeah. So, and that's always an interesting decision, right? There's on the buyer side, there's always the build it, buy it question, right? Do we build it internally or do we buy it? And then when you get to a certain stage, I think it's a really important lesson that every entrepreneur learns if they have any growth, right? Is that you always get to these stages where what got you here won't get you there, right? There's always you get past the plateau and you have a certain range that you can grow in, doing things a certain way, right? And then you always get to a place where you can't just do more of that. You've got to do something different. You got to make more investments in, systems, technology, people, whatever it is. And those are decision points. And so many, it's interesting. There's been a lot of consolidation for many years now in the accounting world. There seems to be, larger firms and very small firms. The medium-sized firms, don't seem to. There aren't that many of them. At least what they used to be. And I think it's because they get to that pivot point, right? It's sort of like, what do you do at that point? And do you really want to? Making all that investment on your own and making that bet, on your own, may be the right move, but a lot of times it's not, right?
Yeah, it's funny. It might be the same in law firms, Corey. I'm not sure, but there's a lot of firms. There's 44,000 approximately accounting firms, CPA firms, I should say, in the U.S. Like 43,000 are under 2.5 million in revenue.
Yeah.
And even bigger than that is about 42,000 or 41,000 are under $1 million in revenue. So there's this gap. And then there's only about 1,000 firms that are above a few million in revenue. And it's because you can make a really good living. You can provide a good service to your clients at a small firm for a small amount of services, right? But you can't do a whole lot of other things. And many accountants like being an accountant, not running a business. And as you get to a certain size, you add partners, you have employees, you got lots of different things going on. You got to worry about technology and automation, and that's a business. And so that's why I think there's a big void in that middle ground that you're discussing. And I don't know if it's the same for law firms.
Yeah. I think it's. I think it's been a little more pronounced in accounting firms, but I think the trend is there in law firms as well. I'm sure. I don't know the stats, but I'm sure they're very similar. You've got a lot of small. And in fact, even at our size, which is not as big as what you guys were, we're a little bit of an anomaly in that to have a like a 7-person, 7-8-person firm that handles the level of sophisticated work we do is somewhat unusual. So it's been, it's been an interesting personal journey for us. So, all right. So you come into this deal and, you decide, hey, this may be the right thing. Now, what goes through your mind in terms of structuring a deal? Of course, I was kidding about, you were the king, but I'm only half kidding because there's some truth in that. It's nice to run your own show. So, for the firm in general, And for you personally, to the extent, what I was thinking you want to share, like what were the things you thought about that, hey, this needs to be in place for me to be able to, for this deal to make sense for the firm as a whole and for me personally?
Yeah, number one by a landslide was, so let's say there was 70 of us. There was always a question in my mind, would I be better off? Right? That question existed. So, but the answer had to be that the other 69 people were better off after the transaction, maybe not the day after the transaction, but in the first 6 to 12 months, they were going to be better off. And I don't mean just financially, I mean career driven opportunities. Were they going to be able to do the passion that they had? If we only did, say, 5 different services, which is probably about right, maybe 6. And we went into a firm that currently has 25 different services, right? If you're a 24-year-old tax person and you really wanted to do M&A only, as an example, at our 70-person firm, we could have done that where you would have spent maybe 25 to 40% of your time, but not full time.
Sure.
Well, at Aprio, we can have that. And so we actually had about 6 people in the first 12 or so months after totally change job choices within the firm, even though they stayed with us. They just changed exactly what they did. And that was, to me, the definition. Number one, that had to be the key. And the cultures had to align. We would not have fit with an organization that was very bureaucratic. And it also would have been more of a struggle if we had overlapped in footprint. Aprio at the time had an office in Birmingham, Alabama, and a couple offices in Atlanta, nothing in the Carolinas at all. Mm-hmm. And so that was important. We felt like that would allow us to be the shiny new penny, if you will, and give us a little bit of autonomy, but also so that our people didn't overlap, so that there wasn't duplication of resources within a region. And then for me, I had to make sure that I would be comfortable with the leader, right? Which is Richard Kopelman. And so, fortunately in this case, I had 5 years of dating, if you will. I'll use that term lightly, because we had become friends. And so I knew enough about his style, about who he was as a human, to know that we would work really well together.
Yeah, that's great. And, it's interesting. I mean, thinking about it from, like looking at the deal aspects, thinking about it from the Aprio side, one of the things I always talk about, I have a 10-step process that I take clients through when they say, hey, I want to expand, right? I want to start doing deals to grow. And let's, I mean, it applies to any kind of deals, but let's talk about M&A because that's what we're talking about here. And, my first step is why, right? It's the, Simon Sinek, everybody else talks about why. I mean, if you don't know your why about why you want to expand, it doesn't, you can't even, how do you even evaluate the kind of deals you want to do, who you're targeting, anything like that. So I always started with why. And, it sounds to me, I mean, I'm just theorizing, obviously, that part of Aprio's why here was geographic expansion into a good, market that they weren't already in, right? So that really makes sense. And the great thing is that, in my once they figure, so let's say I'm sure there were other whys, but let's take that why for them. Well, then if they're doing, the process right, whether it's, not that I work with them, but, I'm sure they went through, okay, so once you know your why, then you could say, okay, who are you targeting, right? This is a very easy example. If your why is I want to expand into geographic areas that we're not in, that could be, that are good for us, we have the right demographics, whatever. Carolinas is one of them. Now you say, who are you targeting? Well, we're targeting firms in the Carolinas with certain other criteria that we're comfortable with. Okay, great. Now they know who to focus on. Then they had to come up with a value proposition for you guys, right? That's my step 3, right? They've got to be able to attract somebody like you and your partners and your employees to say, why would you come to them? So I'm sure they had a value proposition for you. You should sort of share some things that go towards that. And then my next, I won't go through all 10 steps, but the next 2 steps are, then you build a model based upon, the why, who you're targeting, and the value proposition. And then you have a deal structure that comes out of that model. So that's the first 5 steps of my 10. So, some of that was illustrated here. Clearly, geographic expansion is one of the whys, it sounds like, for Aprio.
Yeah, for sure. The geographic expansion was number 1. And number 2 was continuing to build talent. Our profession as a whole is a talent grab. I mean that in a good way, because the talent, our firms are only as good as the people inside of them. We're a professional services firm. And so certainly part of the way Aprio does deals and the way that we're focused on them now is there is a large percentage of the deal that is very specific to the humans that are there. And that means we're not as likely to do a deal where, not that it doesn't happen, but we're not as likely to do a deal where the people are a year away from retirement, as an example, right? I mean, they're swapping equity and they're staying to build and grow a team, and they're energized, and they're people that people want to follow, right? Both team members and clients. Not that they need to be the market leader and the largest or anything like that in their market, but you have to feel like the leader has some passion for the profession, for the firm, whatever, to get the followers. Because and I know the studies continuously show that people leave jobs not because they're necessarily mad at the company, they're mad with their current manager. And if that person can't reflect leadership, that's a problem.
Yeah, totally. And, it's a great illustration, like you said, when I start talking about the why and who you're targeting, you said, like you're not generally targeting, not that, a deal might not come along that you're going to do it, but Aprio's not generally targeting, retiring, accountants. Now, there may be another firm out there that's exactly who they're targeting, right? Yes. Like there's a different model. I mean, there could be very good deals that could be done to buy out books of retiring advisors, especially if you have younger professionals who, you can feed that business to. But that's a totally different deal structure and model and approach and target, and than what Aprio seems to be doing. And you got to know what you're focused on.
Yeah, and what's funny is from 2004 till 2012, my strategy in acquisitions was looking for the retiring, firm, the retiring partner, whatever. And in 2012, we actually pivoted to, it was okay if let's say it was a 2-partner firm, it was okay if one of the partners was retiring, right. But if both were retiring, we weren't interested at that point, because we were looking for more leaders to help us build the business long term. And so we actually had to change. We changed our strategy as we grew for what we were looking for.
Yeah, and it is amazing nowadays in so many fields where talent acquisition is the main driver a lot of times, and it's because it is, listen, I mean, I need another high level, attorney who's entrepreneurial, and with all due respect to my fellow attorneys, that combination is not common. Yeah. I mean, and when I say I need it, I mean, we handle, what we have very well now, but there are growth opportunities that I am not pursuing, like that are just right in front of me. And as an entrepreneur, that, how much that drives you crazy. But like, I can do that. I can bring in X hundreds of thousands more, business just from this one strategy. And I'm not pursuing them because I'm not going to pursue anything we don't have capacity to handle really well. So, my biggest choke point in my business is talent acquisition. It's not, I had somebody reach out to me on LinkedIn, saying, hey, I'm putting together this mastermind group of attorneys, to help you get more revenue and more clients. And I'm like, I get that a lot of people may need that. That's not my issue. I don't need help with that. I need help with getting the talent to actually, handle those more revenues. I can go get that on my own.
That's when you reply and say, can you share the list of people that registered for this webinar so that I can, because those people are struggling with an issue that I'm not, and maybe they'll come work for me.
That's right. If they're great attorneys and whatever, and they need more business, that's, it really is interesting in terms of trends, John. And, that I don't remember a time, and I've been doing this for 35 years. You've been doing it for a little less, but close, right?
20 plus.
Yeah. I feel like I don't remember a time when talent acquisition was more of a driver for deals than right now. I'm not saying it's always been a factor, but I feel like there are so many industries, professional services certainly, but even tech. I mean, I know some people who are tech recruiters, right? Whatever. Again, their issue is not finding the companies to be their clients who they can place people in. Their issue is finding the people to place them, Yeah. I don't know. I think it's, in my experience, at least, that's been a trend that's, I have never seen it where a talent acquisition is more of a driver of deals than at this time.
I agree. I think for me, at least, it's been the last 12 to 36 months has been sort of that key up and it's continuing. And I don't see that turning the corner anytime in the near future being next, 12 to 24. Because I don't look day to day. I'm not that smart that I can predict the turn that quickly. But I think that talent acquisition is a big part of it. And I think it's a combo of, there's leaders who aren't retiring. I think it's a combination of our workforce staying longer, which is good. Why do we lose the talent when they turn 60 or 58 or 65 or whatever the age is, that somebody has in their mind? And then we're also looking to pass on that leadership and skill to a younger generation. And sometimes we need to acquire that talent because we're either having trouble within a market or because we're, growing so fast and we just can't hire fast enough.
Yeah, totally. All right. So you guys, so now you come into Aprio, right? And your role in Aprio is not to sit and review tax returns or financial statements or whatever, right? So why don't you talk, I mean, you alluded to it, but why don't you talk about your role in Aprio and then, I want to go to this deal that you guys just announced 2 days ago, which is a big, I saw it, the announcement before you and I even connected. And I was like, that's a nice deal.
Yeah.
But let's start with your role in Aprio.
Yep. So I'm currently I'm the regional managing partner for the South Atlantic, which includes North and South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. So our teams there, I sort of rotate between the offices. I spend some time in Nashville with our team in Nashville. And most of my time is spent on growth strategies within our markets and people growth strategies, right? Leadership. I spend time with some young partners, young, not necessarily in age, but young in their leadership style. Maybe they're new to this role. Maybe they're new to the firm or whatever. And I'm spending time one-on-one coaching them either on a monthly or a quarterly basis within my team. And then I sit on the board of directors for the firm. So I'm one of the 6 that helps guide the strategy for the firm. And then I focus a lot of my time, no surprise, on merger and acquisition strategy for clients, not just my clients, but clients in general. And then for the firm, I'm spending a lot of time on our firm's growth strategy related to mergers and acquisitions.
I love it. So have you, before we get to this deal that was just announced, since you've been there, have you done other deals before that? Or is this the first big one?
Yep. I've done, I've had a strong hand in 5 deals since November of 19.
I love it. See, yeah, John doesn't sit around, whether it's when he started his firm or now. So, okay. So, and those
I think that's part of it. You say earlier, if I rewind, 10 minutes to a question you asked about what's in it for me, what was in it for me partly was as we got bigger from 0 to 70 people, each time we got larger, I got to do less of what I didn't like to do and more of what I like to do.
Yes.
That was me. That's not everybody, but that was me. And when we jumped into Aprio, I got to even do more of that. And so I got to focus more on strategy, more on coaching leadership, and more help with growth and acquisition strategy for the firm. And so that to me was, you got to be passionate for what's next.
I love it. And listen, listeners and viewers, you've heard me many times talk about what my concept, what I call highest and best use. That ideally all of us, certainly as founders, owners, CEOs, leaders, whatever, we should be working towards spending every minute we can doing our highest and best use areas, which for me are it's something that you're great at, but that's not enough because listen, I'm sure John's great at certain accounting things that he never wants to do again. Like I could be great at drafting documents. I never want to draft a document again. Unfortunately, I've had a team that's been drafting documents for a long time for me. So you got to be great at it though. You got to be passionate about it. You got to love doing it. And a lot of people stop there, but my third one is got to be highly leveraged. It's got to make a big difference for the firm. It's got to move the needle. So, I hear that's what you're talking about. You're like, hey, part of what, you were doing that internally in your own firm by, building out team and all that kind of stuff. But this even got you to jump further to be able to spend more of your time in your highest and best use areas, which is, the great thing about that is it's phenomenal for the firm and it's phenomenal for the person because, we're all much more happy and thrilled and excited when we're doing stuff that we, that meets that criteria and it makes a bigger difference for the company. Yep,
it is. And the teams, it's not just me, but the team seem to be really engaged with that too. Again, the bigger we've gotten, the more they've been able to specialize and do just what they're passionate about.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right. So with the other acquisitions you did before this one we're about to talk about were were more just traditional accounting firm acquisitions?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So let's jump to the one that you announced 2 days ago, because this is something that's not just a traditional, not to minimize the traditional, acquisitions, which are very nice and important to growth or whatever, but this is something more significant or different, right?
It is. It's very different. It's not a traditional accounting, tax, or consulting at all. It's nothing like that. It's a alliance, and so it's an alliance of accounting firms, and it's taking a division out of a much larger firm. We were lucky enough to take a division out of RSM, which, for those of you who don't know, is a top 5 or 6, depending on which survey you look at, accounting firm in the world, and billions in revenue, very large firm, and so it's very exciting, and just announced 2 days ago, and I get to help lead it over the next 10 years as part of our growth strategy.
Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can invite you to a new way to determine your deal readiness. I created a fast and easy assessment that will determine exactly how deal ready you are. Once you complete the assessment, I use your responses to identify the obstacles that are holding you back from being a deal-driven growth genius. It's as easy as heading to CoreyKupfer.com/assessment. That's CoreyKupfer.com/assessment and filling out a few multiple choice questions. I'll be checking in after the episode to see what your results are. Now back to the show.
So talk to us a little bit about, again, to the extent you want to reveal, what was the strategic, analysis, like, what was the why, right? And what, because this is a different acquisition. So what were the reasons to do this deal from the Aprio point of view?
Yep. So it's really 2 things. Number one, we had what we considered a channel partnership for the last 4 or 5 years, which really related to small to mid-size accounting firms, call it the 1 to 10 or $1 to $20 million firm, who couldn't provide all the services their client needed or wanted because they didn't have the expertise, right? It may be that they needed international tax planning and they didn't have anybody who specialized in international tax. It may have been, something very specific in state and local tax. So we've had that for a number of years, and we help today approximately 60 firms across the US with those specialty services. So they're reaching out to us. We're providing consulting, advisory services directly to the firms to help their clients. And that way they don't lose the client. They keep the client. Right. The client's happy. Jimmy or Susie is still their person. They just needed this extra little piece of help and they got it from us. Yep. So that's what we've had for a few years. But what in the pandemic we found us helping a lot with was practice management stuff for small firms, right? This was a really rough couple of years for accounting and consulting, and probably law firms too, with just the number of laws that have been passed, the amount of things clients have had to deal with. You put all that together and it's a real challenge. And so we've been helping small firms and mid-sized firms with that. This allows us to formalize it in a much different manner because RSM had built out this platform over the last 15 years around helping small to mid-sized firms. And so now we get to adopt that and take it and make it, Aprio-fied and change it a little bit. But only things we're going to add are value add. We're not taking anything away. We're taking all the services they currently do, and we're continuing to provide practice management, consulting expertise to those firms. And honestly, I love giving back. You know this about me. I love giving back to the other entrepreneurs, right? And in this case, there are other accounting firms that have built practices. And so I love reaching down and finding ways to help them.
And so just so I understand a little bit, listeners, what makes this platform that RSM built different from just, like the consulting and help you were given, right? Like what is the difference? Yep.
So they have built like a product series, I'll say, right? They productized it such that there's a licensing fee that's paid from the small firms to RSM now to be Aprio, which includes continuing education on a yearly basis for all their team members. It includes some leadership training. They get like 6 different options in leadership training. It includes coaching and practice management on a quarterly basis. It includes roundtable sort of sharing. Think about, in our world, forum type stuff, except within the profession. It includes a conference on an annual basis amongst their peers, amongst the 35 to 70 members that'll be at a conference. It includes some proprietary surveys so that you can compare yourself against the industry benchmark.
Benchmarking.
And so that's a lot of what it is that analysis. And then there's other stuff that it can include if the firm wants it to. Things like, we could lead corporate retreats. If they have partner retreats on a yearly basis, we can help lead those. And we already know a lot about their business. We already have a lot of data on it. We can really help, guide the direction and share and be a resource for them. And then the last thing is technical resources. They have I'll say an 800 number to us that allows them to get any technical question answered. Because if you're a 20-person accounting firm, you might not have the deep expertise that a 700-person firm might. And so that allows them to have, that extra phone a friend, if you will, from Regis many years ago.
Got it. And I'm assuming that this acquisition came along with a bunch of talent as well, right?
Actually, it's the first acquisition I've ever done. No humans are coming.
No humans. Wow. Okay.
First time ever. I've never done a deal like, except if you go back to 2004 when we acquired a sole practitioner who had no employees. Right. Other than that, it's never happened. I've never done a deal like this, and it's definitely different.
Interesting. Okay, so now you guys are gonna, obviously because there are humans that even if it's mostly a tech play and it's online, whatever, there are humans necessary, right? To, so you guys are going to be able to integrate this and use your existing talent and, or maybe hire some folks to be able to run this thing, huh?
Yep. We're going to have a couple of hires that we'll announce in the next couple of weeks. And one that will be a direct leader of the alliance. And then the other will be more of an administrative, and then long-term, and probably about a year from now, we'll hire an extra learning and development person specific to this. And so there are some hires that'll happen along the way, but a lot of it, to your point, is we have a lot of these resources already. And so just a portion of their time is going to be allocated to helping serve these firms, which everybody's really engaged and excited about.
I love it. Do you know, and is it appropriate to share what RSM's motivation was for selling this thing that they built?
Yep. So RSM is really focused on trying to help the firms, and they felt like that we would potentially help in a different way, right? They have built this thing for 15 years, and they felt like they got it where it could get, but that we could probably be the transition that could help these firms for the next 15 years. And I say next 15, but it'll be longer than that, but you know what I mean? Right. And they felt like they did everything they could, and they were going to focus their time and efforts. They have another alliance that's for really large firms. It's for really large firms, and they're going to focus their attention and time on that, which is why no people are coming along. They're going to keep the people and focus on the bigger alliance. Got it.
Interesting. So listen, I know you personally, and I know that you are really driven and through EO and other ways, you've so given to, entrepreneurs at various levels and helping them grow. So I know that's part of the pure motivation of this, to be able to make a difference for folks. I'm sure there's some economics in it, so you guys make some money, although my guess is, that this is not going to be the way, this is not going to be the huge revenue driver for the firm, that wasn't it. But I can see that there's another possibility that comes out of it, because it's always the way my strategic mind works. I mean, you're building relationships with all of these small firms. I could imagine that, some of them, and I'm not saying this is the primary reason you did it, but I can imagine that some of them might not then become potential tuck-in, targets for the firm as you get to know folks, potentially.
Yeah, I think there's natural, if you build relationships, no matter what it is, right? There's natural, if I look at my acquisitions, right? Even my discussion about what I did with Richard, I had known him for 5 years. I knew that I aligned with him. So when it came time, when we looked at our future, they were really the only firm we were going to explore. We were going to keep it ourselves or merge in. And I think that that's a natural fit. RSM, over the decades that they've had the larger alliance, I don't know if they've ever done any of the small firms, just because it's such a big size difference. But in their larger firm alliance, they've done a handful of deals. They usually do one every 3 to 4 years with one of those firms, because they share philosophies, they share management styles, they share a lot of different things. And so I think that it could happen. definitely a probably number 50 on the driver of the top 50 reasons, but it definitely could happen because if people share similar philosophies and they become friends over a period of years, it's natural, I think.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I think you're providing such a great service for the industry. And listen, it's like in any industry, there are always, there are just things the way you need excess capacity and help and whatever. As a smaller firm, you just can't, I remember, so early when I started my firm, I had a good tax guy who was independent, but it's as a lawyer, right? I mean, the accounting firms, whatever I'll coordinate with, but sometimes you need a tax lawyer, right? And frankly, for a firm my size, they're hard to find. Most of them are at big law firms or accounting firms or in-house at companies. Because again, we do stuff that's more sophisticated than a lot of firms our size, we need quality domestic and international, tax and deal tax lawyers and all that kind of stuff. And I will say, man, I don't know, over a decade ago, I had a gap where I didn't have a good solution for that, right? And it affected my competitiveness. There were deals I lost because they went to firms that had in-house tax capacity. I found the firm about 10 years ago that was brilliant. They're a law firm of all major tax lawyers coming out of big firms, and they realized there was a gap in the market for firms like ours, and they don't market directly to clients at all. They market themselves to sophisticated smaller firms that need sophisticated tax to be their outsourced tax department. And it's a brilliant business model,
Yeah.
And I actually took them on a cold call because I was like, this actually sounds, 10 plus years ago, maybe a decade ago now. And it's been amazing because I now have, and we obviously coordinate with the accountants as well, but I now have tax capacity that rivals any of the big firms, because, these guys have such great experience and they built a brilliant business model, which is entrepreneurs, I know you and I get shared over the years. We're always fascinated by people who figure out cool entrepreneurial models. But
yeah, they saw it and they filled a gap. They
gap.
Noticed an issue, a competitive disadvantage, and they helped find the gap that could make smaller firms competitive against larger firms. That's amazing. I love it.
That's right. And obviously, and it's very similar. I mean, it's not apples to apples, but there's some similarities in that they help a firm like mine, have stronger capacity. They're not competing for my clients. I have no worry that they're going to look to, because they don't do the corporate work, they don't whatever. And obviously the whole model is based upon being, having a relationship. So they're not going to steal the clients away. And for them, they don't have to pitch client by client. What they do is they get in with a certain number of quality law firms and then they get fed the business, So, it's a great model. So, there's some similarities to this platform where you can provide some expertise, excess services for these folks. They can rely upon it. It helps them serve their clients better, and maintain those relationships. So,
we say it helps them punch above their weight class, right? So like if you think about MMA or professional boxing, weight classes, and it's hard for a small guy to beat up a large guy, or the same for a girl. And so this allows the smaller firms to punch above their weight class. A 20-person accounting firm can act like a 100-person accounting firm. They might not be able to do all the work and they might not make all the margin on it, but that's okay. They still win the core of the client. They still get 90% of the workload. They just can't do this 10%, and they use us as their outsource.
And if they can't do the 10%, they at times actually risk losing the 90%. So
yes.
Yeah, so totally get it. All right, so I just want to take a moment because we'll wrap up. I'm going to get to my last two questions, but we've been talking mostly about your journey because I think it's great and it's illustrative. But of course, you continue to do and have for many years done a significant amount of M&A work for your clients. And we did allude to a couple of trends out there around talent, whatever. But just give me a quick. What are you seeing in out there in the market these days? I mean, obviously we are semi post COVID, whatever. And I've talked a little bit on this podcast about the interesting way that COVID has adversely impacted and positively impacted different sectors. But what are you seeing these days?
We're seeing a trend, a couple of things. We're seeing more cash in deals than we've seen in the last 10 years. 100%. Maybe not as much as we had in 2005 and 6, maybe, but we're seeing a lot of cash in deals, more so. And I think it's a couple of things. there's more competition for a deal, but there's also more cash on the sidelines because people have spent less, and some have received some of this government funding that's been handed around. And so there's more cash in deals. I think that's one major trend. The other is when somebody's made a decision, they seem to want to get out a lot faster than they would have before. That's a combo of tax. That's a combo of they don't want to deal with the next COVID downfall. They don't want to deal with the next Delta variant, right? They want to get out before the E variant or the F variant or whatever comes out. And I think those are a couple of the reasons. And then the other thing I'd say is we're finding that we don't see too many people interested in turnaround projects. So where maybe a handful of years ago, I'll take a stab at that because I think I can turn it around. Right now, we're not seeing any turnaround deals. And I think it's because people are afraid that it's not a business that can be turned around. Maybe it got so affected by COVID that is, I hate this word, the new normal. And they're afraid that that's the business model in the future. And so I think those are some of the trends we're seeing.
Yeah. And I 100% agree with all of them. I'm seeing the same thing. It's a lot of money out there, boy, a lot of private equity. I mean, a lot of money, and coming into segments, I do a lot in financial services, which most people know. I mean, God, there was no money in that space 10, 12, 15 years ago. I mean, you couldn't even get a bank to lend. And now the money that's getting thrown around and the deals that are getting done, are crazy.
Well, things are getting silly in M&A when private equity acquires an accounting firm in New York City, which happened 3 weeks ago or something, as Eisner Amper, which is it's a mega firm. They're a top 25 firm in the country, took on private equity. And that's to my knowledge, that's never happened in the accounting profession. So that tells you how exciting and how much money there is on the sidelines if pegs want to get into accounting.
Well, yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, because nobody, even the successful accounting firms have never been, defined as unicorns or like not even close, right? That kind of growth that you would think private equity is normally looking for. But I had, who was it? It might have been one of the investment banks I had recently, was talking about how private equity money is coming down market, it definitely is not. I'm not saying that the eyes of deals down market. It's still also busy, but the point is, it's down market in that the return expectations, right? That not everybody, private equity is not only going into the next Facebook or Tesla, right? It's going into other, more sort of, conventional growth, still high growth, but not mega unicorn growth, industries. Yeah, no question. Well, John, we can talk forever. And I always love whether it's on the podcast or whether it's hanging out at an EO event or whatever, you and I, we have so many common interests and, love this stuff and we can talk about it forever. However, we are approaching the end of our time here. So I just wanted two final questions. One is people want to find out more about you, not only at Aprio, but you're also, obviously we mentioned your book, you do speaking. What's the best place for them to go?
Yep. So you can find me on LinkedIn, John Bly, CPA, same on Twitter, same handle, or you can email me. It's john.bly, BLY at Aprio, APRIO.com.
Awesome. And my final question, which is also different from the one I asked back on episode 7, is freedom is my highest ideal in life. And for me, that means everything from freedom from all people in the world from oppression to the reason I'm an entrepreneur and I haven't had a boss in 30 something years, right? What does freedom mean to you and how does it impact your life and business?
Freedom to me means I get to decide yes or no. I get to decide on a daily basis, a weekly basis, how I set my calendar, how I do my activities, and not be mandated to do something that I really am not engaged in or not excited about. And I think that applies in both business and life. And I got 3 kids, and so sometimes I might have less freedom than I did. But those things are really critical to how I make decisions because I like to have time around, not necessarily work less, by the way. It's the time I want it to be on things that I really actually enjoy. I don't like doing things that I don't like to enjoy. I'm too old for that.
And folks, John's not that old, but yes, he's too old for that. We all should feel too old for that,
Yep.
Love it. John Bly, thank you so much for being a phenomenal return guest on the DealQuest podcast.
Thanks, Corey. Appreciate you having me, buddy.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. I want to invite you to a unique way to tap into the wisdom and experience of the DealQuest community. Join the DealQuest Deal Den Zoom calls, a free monthly 90-minute mastermind. In the mastermind, we address all the challenges you may be facing and help support you with the opportunities that may arise in terms of deal-driven growth. You will get input not only from me, but all the members on the call will collaborate and serve each other in a mastermind format. To sign up for the free mastermind, go to www.corykupfer.com/dealden. That's corykupfer.com/dealden. I'll see you there. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.